So I'd like to call the second meeting of the Budget Committee to order Thursday, May 19th. So attendance-wise, we have Lori McLaughlin on line. What's that? No, okay. All right, so item number 2, materials presented at the April 28th committee meeting. Any questions about those? No? All right. So I'll get a chance to, well, hopefully you had the chance to review the minutes from our last meeting. Any questions, comments, revisions on those?
I would move for approval.
I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Wally, second by Aaron. All right.
Aaron,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Flynn,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Janet,
Yes.
Wally,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Stephanie. Yes. Lori,
Yes.
thank you, all in favor.
All right, minutes approved. 3 down. All right, let's keep this up. So for today's agenda, we're going to just some follow-up items from last meeting. We had some, I guess, work requested of Steve and staff, and so he has those that he had shared with us and will present. Then we'll have public comments, questions, discussion after that, and we'll see what, if any, action we want to take this evening. Anybody want to move anything around? Feeling okay about where we're at? Okay. Steve.
Thank you, Matt. For those online and also for in the room, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Steve, for the record, can I also just point out that Ashley Potter's been promoted to panelist as well as in minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, so we've got some, as you can see on the agenda, we had the additional items, the new items listed under number 5, and I'll touch base on all of those here as we go through. I promised the presentation will be shorter than last time, but I wanted to highlight each of these things. But first I wanted to go to one that's not on here, and we'll get more into it on the first attachment on the budgeted FTE by school. But this is our monthly enrollment sheet that we share each month at the board meeting, and this is as of 5/1. Do we have a couple Central Hall parents here? How are you this evening? So I just wanted to talk about that. We've had some inquiries about Central House staffing. And you know, this enrollment situation that started 26 months ago with the pandemic. I know people in the room can't really see this screen too well, but online hopefully you can. But again, this is a monthly report that we share, and as we've talked about frequently over the last 26 months, we saw a drop of 400 students, or 10% of our enrollment district-wide.
Just wanted to note that this is on our last page of the packet.
Yes.
So.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Matt. Which is a $3.6 million hole, and since the state is down 30,000 students, our amount per student did go up over the course of the year, so it netted out to about a $2 million hole. And as we went through the pandemic and not knowing what service model we would be in and how many kids may or may not come back, as we were budgeting this time last year, you know, we were we saw our lowest numbers at all the schools, and you could see that what the numbers were. June 18th of 2020, we were up at 3,940, including the 2 charter schools. And as of June 28th, 2020, or June 18th, 2021, we were down to 3,563. You could see that the impact on the different schools was, they were all negative, but the differences were quite pronounced. Central Howell in particular saw a 32% drop between June of 2020 and June of 2021. They went from 180 students to 120 students. So they've always had 7 teachers, classroom teachers, 7 rooms. They were always full at about 180 or so. And of course, just like the other schools, we didn't know what things would look like as we went into this school year. We were in the hybrid model at the time, didn't know if we would be back to full day in person with or without masks, etc. So at that time, we just took our best guess. We did make some adjustments through the district. Central Howell was not the only school affected. For example, Butte Creek dropped. They've been up to 320 when they're full. They were already dropped to 300 or below before the pandemic, and then they dropped further. And so they went from 13 teachers to 6 teachers. Central Howell went, 13 teachers to 12 teachers. Central Howell went from 7 teachers to 6 teachers. Robert Frost and Mark Twain, back in the 1819 and 1920 year, before everything shut down, they were bursting at the seams at 750 students between those 2 schools. Today they sit at 610. When Leslie Roach was the principal at Robert Frost, she identified a natural cyclical downturn of enrollment that was coming to those schools already pre-pandemic, and it was starting to happen, and then the pandemic hit, and then of course we had the restructure to K-5. So at this point, we don't know exactly how much of the decrease is attributed to each of those factors, but when they were at 740, 750, they had 31 teachers between the 2 schools. This year they have 27. So those are just some examples of adjustments that were made where we talked about right sizing, which was part of Scott's superintendent's budget message, and really we were able to keep to a ratio of about 25-1 at the K-8 level. There's still some schools that need adjustments. Silver Crest will be down a teacher next year, but we've been able to do this just through attrition and haven't had to lay anyone off and trying to save and adjust based on shrinking revenues. So I just wanted to kind of point out that there's a number of schools involved with this. The high school also has less teaching staff. However, they do have some additional monies with Measure 98 and SIA money and Measure 98 specifically for 8th through 12th grade. So general fund wise, there's less FTE, but overall it's not too far off from where they were. So the thing I wanted to say is that with Central Howell and all the schools, Central Howell is definitely trending back towards a 7th teacher. As of today, they're actually closer to 100. They have 150 students right now, and six. Excuse me.
Please.
Pardon. Please do not interrupt.
Yeah.
150 kids now. They're projected at 159 for next year, and they've been trending up just this week. So 160 kids. They could easily be above that. It's changing daily. And the other thing I want to point out is that whether the budget's approved tonight or on another evening, the number of staff at each specific location is not set in stone by approval of the budget. The budget committee and the board ultimately approved the budget for an appropriation level in each program area, instructional services and support services, for the administration to manage 365 days a year based on what's going on. So as always, we stand prepared to add resources to whatever school comes in with the, you know, with the numbers, and we don't need to make that decision on May 19th. So definitely trending towards another teacher. It doesn't necessarily have to be 175 to get a 7th teacher back. It could be, you know, 165, 170, because one of the things that has to be looked at is, you know, we can't control how the grades pan out in terms of kids per grade. A lot of times, I know Leslie can attest that the numbers don't always work out very well. And, you know, fortunately at Central Howell, they do have we've had a pretty robust kindergarten, kindergarten roundup numbers across the board, which is encouraging to see. For the first time in 26 months, we have seen the enrollment trends going in the right direction. I don't think we're getting 400 kids back anytime soon, but at least we're heading in the right direction. And so one of the dilemmas at Central Howell, or could be at another school, would be the grade situation's not quite working out. Most of the schools do have blends, but if we're looking at, you know, I think we're already up to possibly 25 or 26 projected kindergarten at Central Howell, that could be a determining factor even earlier than, say, a total number trigger. So I just want those that may be tuned in online and for those that are here to understand the situation, and we'll be monitoring it very closely.
I have a few questions about
Sure.
that. First, if they do add another teacher there, that may negatively affect the number of educational assistants. One, because budget-wise, I think they've got a fairly high number of educational assistants, so that may negatively affect that. Would that be the case?
Don't answer that one.
Well, it might. It
Yeah.
might look at that. I mean, for instance, let's take that kindergarten class, and let's say they get up to 27. We don't add a teacher to kindergarten, but we would probably want to add some more additional classified support there. So, I mean, those are all decisions that we're looking at across the board. Right now, you know, our classified allocation for educational assistance does vary widely from building to building. And one of the things we just did with our principals yesterday is making sure we had an accurate count of who was where, how many hours, and I think Steve's put together a spreadsheet that kind of calculates all that into consideration. So, I mean, that might happen, but those educational assistants also provide different supports to kids in a different way than just a teacher would. So I don't think it's a +1, -1 coming out of here necessarily.
Okay.
It would probably, I'd have to say, if you put me on the spot on a yes or no, probably would not be making that decision.
Oh, great.
'Cause,
Okay.
Yeah.
Typically, what I've seen in the past, if we have a high, particularly specific classes, if you have a high student-teacher ratio, you may end up supporting that more heavily with the educational assistants. That's why I was asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a common practice,
Yeah.
especially get some of those, you know, larger K-1 classes. It's definitely something to do, to consider to support that classroom. But, you know, we found, if anything, kids need adults and need more adults interacting in their lives. And so I don't think it's a +1, -1 to try to balance a budget that way.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
And then you mentioned attrition. Can you tell us about how many teachers, how much staff has been reduced over the last 2 years due to attrition? Approximately?
Approximately. In terms of off the top of my head, of the places where we've been able to reduce, just in some of these places where we've had, I'd say probably just about 4 or 5 positions that we haven't brought back in some of these locations, like the Butte Creek, you know, had a retirement that we didn't bring back. Central Howell had a resignation that we didn't bring back.
So it sounds like a relatively low number.
It's been, I mean, yeah, largely we haven't reduced FTE as a result of just shrinking enrollment. We've just taken advantage of attrition opportunities to not bring people back.
Okay.
But we didn't rehire the position due to the shrinking enrollment.
Yes, correct.
I mean,
Yeah.
Robert Frost and Mark Twain would still have 31 teachers if the enrollment was where it was. But yeah, we had, you know, retirements, people on leave as well. So, well, yeah, I'm sorry, do you have another question?
One more question.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
I had a lot of phone calls today, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of following up with some things. If you go on the district website and look at transfers,
Mm-hmm.
there's 127 openings within the district, yet we were down 400 students. And I didn't go in and look at all the details, but can you kind of explain where the disconnect is there? We're down 400, but we only have 127 openings for transfers.
Well, those are, I mean, that's a good question. I think that the principals, with the uncertainty of who's coming back and trying to figure, I mean, just within our own, you know, within our own school district, trying to, I think it's a delicate balance to figure out who's coming back that lives here versus who we might want to open the doors up. So I could see that potentially reopening those, the principals can control those, and so if they want to reopen and add more slots, but I think there's a little bit of unknown out there between who's coming back that lives within the school district.
Okay, so they're being cautious.
They're being cautious.
And don't we have a cap on a cap on transfers? I remember we set it each year at the board level, don't we? I can't remember the number off the top of my head.
400 and 500.
But I think, Wally, what that's, maybe I'm wrong, that report is probably saying we have X amount out of the allocated amount that we allow into the district, not out of the 400, unless I'm completely misunderstanding what you're saying.
It could be. I don't know.
If we have 100, and you said 147
Have
open slots,
127.
out of the X amount that we allocate
out of
each
400
year.
that we're down. And at the same time, Scotts Mills and Silvercrest, I know we're already had low enrollment. So math just didn't work for me. That's why I was asking.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, what we tried to do is, you know, if Central Howell, for example, was down 60, that kind of spoke to 2 teachers, but we only did 1, and that was kind of the philosophy across the board because we didn't know how many kids might come back and when we might return to full in-person. And being slightly overstaffed at a lot of these schools this year, that's really kind of being covered with ESSER dollars to kind of help kids get back into school and address unfinished learning. And so, you know, I really think at Central Howell we guessed about right. You know, they had 120 kids when last school year ended, so 6 teachers, 20 to 1. They came back at 143, which was great, you know, to start the school year. We were really happy about that. And then it took them a little while, but they did hit the 150 mark in January, if you kind of look at a month-by-month situation. So second semester, it started to, you know, feel a little tight. I understand that. So hopefully that helps a little bit on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Chair Plummer, are you opening up for discussion? Can I go?
Yeah, I think if it's still,
Relevant to this
Yeah.
topic. So I just want to clarify, because in the past, I've seen that come August or September, when there's been an unexpected influx of students into a school, that the district has added a teacher at that spot, and no board action was required. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't match exactly what the budget is, but that's okay. You have the flexibility to move teachers in that situation, and that's right?
Yes.
Thank you.
As long as we think we're going to be within budgeted appropriation levels
Got it.
set by the budget committee and the board, yes.
Okay.
If I may, if somebody wanted to transfer either into the district or to Central Howell from another school within the district, wouldn't the current situation limit the ability to entertain that? And how does that play into your decision regarding staffing?
Yeah, you know, in Central Howell specifically, about a third of the student body is inter or out-of-district transfers. So then that's been a very, you know, I don't know, I'd have to ask Mrs. Carsley about, you know, what transfers she may have in front of her right now. I don't know that, but yes, that could come into play for sure. I know that's something that Mr. Palmer has talked about. You know, he has a couple at a specific grade that he can't take at this point, and it's not so much the total number, it's we can't really plug in another one to this grade. So that does come into play. You start to, in both situations, you could get into a situation where, you know, if there's some potential transfers out there and they're not quite to the number, that would be maybe again something that could they would come to us and we could look at it and say, well, yeah, that'll get us to a number where we think we could support that. So yeah, there is kind of a
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it seems like when we need students, at least being open to that would
Mhm.
make a lot of sense to me.
yeah.
Well, that happens, right? We accept transfers up to the first day of school.
Back when things were at capacity at more of the schools, it typically did kind of close up in the spring, at most of the schools. There might have been a few exceptions, but now things have kind of changed. And we've, since been in the pandemic, the whole cycle is thrown off, the volume has been down.
And
Yeah.
I would just say, as a principal who did this for a number of years, many of us had a set number in the spring during the transfer window of, we know this third grade is at 21 kids and I'm gonna accept 2 transfers at that grade level because I know I still have a bubble if a couple more kids move in. And so I'd have a very small number that I would accept in the spring, and then I would hold all of those transfers and people were welcome to reapply, and I would then approve more in August. Once I knew whites of their eyes, who's living in my attendance boundary and showing up at Robert Frost, then I would accept more transfers, or I would get notification that someone moved over the summer and I knew I was losing a student, and then I would accept another transfer. So many principals wait until August to look at transfers again, if parents stick with the transfer paperwork.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I have a question too. So Steve, you said that if the budget allows for it, you would add that position. Where would that come from in the budget? Is that something that is accounted for already? Are all the FTEs that you're proposing here filled, or are there some that you've left open to account for that? Does that make sense?
I think there's some vacancies currently.
Yeah, we currently have openings at the high school and in the middle school. We have openings in different places.
And if enough returning students came back, that's additional revenue. So potentially more revenue than we anticipated, and therefore it could be an additional FTE, or it could be an FTE that comes from another place, potentially.
Thank you.
And we have some of that movement every year, even when we're not in the pandemic, people that request transfers, or sometimes there's other.
Yeah, sometimes, and part of
situations.
it's the puzzle, trying to put things together. So for instance, Steve mentioned that, we did transfer, someone from Silvercrest, and it just happened that we had an opening in town where someone from Silvercrest wanted to move to a different school. And so those are nice, it's nice when those puzzle pieces fit together like that, where you have a problem in one place and a solution in another place that works out for everybody.
And like you said, the head count, let's just use Central Health as an example. We get those 30 kids back. You multiply that, 9,000 a kid, roughly. That's $270,000 plus to our budget. So at that point, it's more than self-sustaining to add another FTE or more within that school. So yeah, if those numbers come back, it'll be self-funding and then some.
Absolutely. So in terms of kind of the same topic, I wanted to show this is kind of a new formatted sheet that we've been working on here this year that shows the FTE by school. Now, the last sheet was really just a raw enrollment sheet. This actually shows and I think that's in you have a hard copy of that because you won't be able
It's
to see
like
it
page
up on the
3
screen.
of today's packet.
Basically, we really wanted a executive summary version of what each school looks like in terms of not just enrollment, but the staffing in the different service categories. So whether it be, the first area there is what we were just talking about, the classroom teachers, and then essentially what that average, that ratio is per school. So this is based on projected enrollment. And again, we know that Central Howell is closer to 160, not 150. So again, this is changing daily. And then as you go across from left to right, there's, a lot of things that get kind of forgotten about. Those people as you see them in the buildings, but some of them in the past have been part of a school budget and others have been part of a department like special education or something like that, but they're all getting resourced and deployed to the school. So the intent behind this was to show the resources by FTE that are getting resourced out to each school, and also there was an element that we've never really included before that gets lost in the shuffle is we get funded by the state based on our weighted membership. So if we have, 3,600 kids, we're getting paid on about 4,100 average daily membership weighted, the additional weights being for English language learners, students on IEP, special education, poverty ratios, and those types of things. So that's what the funding is based on. So those resources need to follow those students. And so when you look to the far right of this spreadsheet, you can see the situation at each school in terms of their ELL population and their IEP populations, and it's quite a bit different at each of the schools. And then we also have 4 Title I-A schools, which is a federal grant program we discussed a little bit last meeting, that's based on poverty. And we used to have 6, and now it's 4. Butte Creek, Mark Twain, Robert Frost, and Silverton Middle School. So you could see the column, other licensed instructional supports, Title I-A, that special federal funding source pays for that resource at that school, but you won't see it at the other schools. There's also some classified title support as well. So as you go through that middle section just to the right of licensed FTE, you'll see most of these positions are either, well, you have principals, and then you have licensed counseling, and then after that, to the right of counseling, those other columns are classified supports, whether they be special needs assistants, which we have over 50 special needs assistants in the district, and educational assistants in the classroom, library media, secretarial support, etc. And then you get over to the weighted column. So that very last column is really showing, kind of like we talk about the student-teacher ratio. This is kind of a taking into account all classes of employees, 80 MW per FTE. So, when you look at that, there's some slight differences there. But the schools that maybe have Title I dollars or maybe a higher population of IEPs or that sort of thing, you would expect to have a slightly lower number there. So, and then at the bottom, the one thing that's not included in the columns is there is a column there for, in the licensed section on the left, for the arts. And the FTE that shows up there, it's a total of 8.0 across the district. Licensed arts FTE is what exists today. But Leslie's been heading up the music work group, and I think you might have your last meeting next week. They're recommending 3.0 additional licensed FTE in the K-8 schools, is that correct? So that's footnoted on the bottom, because those need to be, I'm not sure exactly how those FTE work by school. So just wanted to make a mention of that, and that's going to be paid for out of the SIA funds. So hopefully this is something that is helpful in terms of just seeing all the schools, one page by FTE. We know this represents a very large portion of our budget, and this is how they're being resourced to the students and the buildings.
Regarding the principal allocation there, is there a formula that's used to determine how much FTE time goes to a principal at an individual school?
Well, this really hasn't changed since your days on the board in terms of the FTE by school. So in terms of the actual formula, I don't know how it originally was. I mean, there is a kind of a proportionate allocation based on
before it was just basically
the size of the
It was
school.
on perceived need and look at the individual situation. Is that still the case?
I would say largely it's still the case on enrollment and needs and kind of the different
Yeah.
configurations. And, you know, our K-8 principals have done a great job of taking on, you know, like Kevin Palmer taking on transportation. You know, he's got a little bit bigger K-8 school, but he stepped in and took on that. You know, Jamie McCarty, a little bit smaller K-8 school, picked up a couple other schools. So
very
trying to
similar there.
trying to keep it balanced, but also kind of where the needs are at.
Okay, thanks.
So I say the one thing that did change a little bit was the middle school used to be 1.5, but they had a TOSA, I believe, there a couple years ago, and they kind of changed that and made the halftime principal full-time, and they don't have the TOSA now. So it's kind of a swap on that.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
This is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, this is really good.
Thank you.
Can you remind me what TOSA is?
Teacher on special assignment.
Thank you.
So the next thing that I wanted to show you was, this was something we did 3 years ago that was a request that I thought was well received, and then we got into the pandemic and it hasn't been seen again. But here it is. Now, sorry for those of you on the screen, but you do have a hard copy. And I do have our facilities director, Lauren Stanley, here this evening to help answer any questions that you may have about projects, either past, present, or future, because what I've done on this version is I recreated on the top of the screen a by school look at the just standard maintenance costs there at the top, starting with utilities, and then we actually get into the custodial costs at each building, which is not included on that previous spreadsheet, by the way, but those are, of course, pushed into the schools as well. And then some other ongoing costs that we have. So I then total that up where it says total utilities and annual maintenance costs, and we do a little bit of math. Based on the square footage, we have a cost per square foot because that had come up, and then based on enrollment, so cost per student. That changed a little bit because of the enrollment situation that we're in. Where some of the schools dropped their enrollment, that cost per student obviously went up because the custodial FTE is exactly the same in the schools that they were, you know, previously. But so then below that is where we have budgeted maintenance projects, and the reason that we separated that out is because that varies quite greatly from year to year. You know, there's a few schools that get a heavier dose of projects in 1 year, and then the next year they may not have anything. It might just be, you know, we obviously have $100,000 in the budget just for unanticipated repairs. Like, you know, I think Evergreen had a little water situation this year, those types of things. But as far as the planned projects go, there's quite a bit of change from year to year. So what I did was down at the bottom, like last time, I put what the budgeted projects are. In this case, they're in black font. But what I added this year is a historical piece, which is in red font. And I may have missed something for sure, and certainly some of the smaller things aren't necessarily included. I only had so much room, but I wanted to provide a context to everything that's been done. I started here in the 2015-16 year, so this is everything since 2016, which includes all of the seismic projects that started Scotts Mills, and then Butte Creek, Victor Point, and then Mark Twain, and the Robert Frost covered play area, the Silverton Middle School, the old high school gym, about $7 million worth of seismic grants. Those are all listed on here, but there's a lot of things that just, unless you're involved in that school as a parent or a staff member, that you wouldn't necessarily know. I just thought it was good to recap those projects. So there's a lot on here, and you may have some questions. I can tell you for this year's plan, you'll see for this year, well, I do want to say for those at Central Howell, we are anxiously awaiting our newest application to the state for a seismic rehabilitation of the gymnasium. They're supposed to have the answers out to districts by the end of May. And back when we received all those grants early on, we've hit a bit of a dry spell the last couple of years. They were $1.5 million grants. They're now $2.5 million grants. So we're hoping we get that one. But in terms of what's budgeted in the general fund, you could see the high school has a big number, $703,000. The reason for that is $386,000 of the $703,000 is for the track replacement, which has been, we're so thankful for private donations that have paid for that. And we already have the vendor coming in July, and we're really excited to do that. So that's well over half of that number. Now we have two other major projects budgeted there. We'll probably only do one next year and one the following year. One is to seal the cracks and cover asphalt the parking lot here at the high school. And the other one is we have to replace door locks and hardware and rekey the entire high school, and Lauren can explain that a little bit more. There's several reasons for that. So we may buy some hardware this next year, but we're going to do a lot of planning and make sure that maintenance and the high school are kind of aligned on what we do, because there's a safety security issue there, and as far as which direction we go. So so one of those two will probably fully take place this year, and next year, the year after, we'll probably get the key project done. I apologize, Lauren, but I didn't get a chance to look at your email. Apparently, the gymnasium was just redone, just completed. Is that correct? Yeah. And it wasn't just your standard yearly kind of light sand and revarnish. It was a complete overhaul, and that was done at no cost for the most part. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. The finish application failed last year, and it was peeling up off the floor, and it took a very long time to get the manufacturer to come down and look at it, but we were able to finally get them down here to look at the situation, and they went ahead and covered the only way to repair it, which is to fully resand the floor, repaint it, refinish it, and we just literally completed that today with the last coat finish on, so it looks really good.
Yeah, I'll check it out on the way out today. So then at the middle school, it's a bigger number, and this is not pleasant news to report, but $147,000 of the $200,000 is needed to resurface the James Street wing roof. We've done the Schlater side, and Lauren, you could speak a little bit about what's going on there.
So,
Could I have you come up to the mic, please?
Yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Step up to the mic.
All right, much better. So the problem we have there is that building, the roof system is, over 30 years old, and it was a 15-year roof system that was put on the building. There were numerous leaks when we moved into that building and opened it up as a middle school, and we did the best job we could to patch with the available budget we had.
We have the pictures up there for you now.
Yeah, this gives you kind of an idea. These pictures are taken of the James Street wing, and as you can see, there's numerous patches, and the problem is that roofing membrane is so far beyond its useful life. It is failing, and the polyvinyl chloride is what the coating is that's over a polyester scrim, which is the fabric, and that has basically went away, and so the water is getting through the roof system. So what we're trying to do is the most cost-effective option we have, which is to coat that roof system with basically a silicone product, and that will allow it to reseal. The other problem is it's basically, over time it has shrunk and it's pulling away. We have areas that you can see that are basically floating. They're not touching the roof underneath, and they've just basically, like I said, it's pulling away from the system. The other problem we have is with you can't bond to it anymore. And we have several areas where it just basically splits. It's so brittle at this point where it'll just crack and split, and you'll have a huge issue. And you can't bond to it. Steve was showing one of the pictures, which is how they normally would take care of that process, where you actually weld a patch onto it, and you can't do that anymore. So the process is basically the other picture where they clean the roof and then coat it with that system. The sad thing is just the timing. We started on this because we knew it was going to be a while before we could get a bond, like Steve shared. We did Area A. We've done most of that roofing over there. And now we need to get to this area. We've had multiple leaks on that wing this year, and we just unfortunately have to do it. The original budget on this was around $75,000. That was a couple years ago. Things have skyrocketed. Our low bid was $145,000. We had two other bids that came in over $200,000. The top bid was $236,000. But once again, I don't know that I can keep those classrooms dry for another school year, and we know that we're looking at least a few years to be able to do any kind of bond and construction. So,
Thanks, Lauren.
questions?
Yeah, if you have any other, questions on any of the projects there, yeah, feel free.
I just have a real quick one, tiny detail, but I'm curious. Victor Point looks like they're going to redo their irrigation supply system, but there's no cost allocated for that. Does that mean it's a donation? Can I assume that someone is?
My apologies. So that was unfortunately, there was several of us working on the budget document, and it got put in Silver Crest.
Oh, okay.
It was actually for Victor Point. So
No worries.
The money's there. It just, unfortunately, it was.
Good catch, Janet, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, it made me think, we have such generous communities, and I wondered where those donations are reflected, if there's anywhere that we capture the kinds of things that are donated to either do playgrounds or, the communities just really come together, and a lot of times schools are able to do some of those things by virtue of donation. I'm just wondering if that's captured anywhere.
The ones in red that I knew of that are captured, and if I missed one, I really want to apologize to anybody out there, but like you could see Butte Creek, for example, playground equipment, community funded and organized.
Oh, got it, okay.
I know Prattam has a couple of those there, of course Victor Point, and I know there's other things for sure, and some that may not have even, the different size projects. I mean, certainly there's been other projects at schools that have happened where all school communities have contributed, there's no doubt. Lauren, the one other thing I thought maybe be good to mention here is what we have to do up at Silver Crest this year,
So
the parking thing.
The parking area?
Yeah.
So, we've been working for a couple of years, actually, trying to figure out a way to pave the main parking area in front of the main building up there at Silver Crest. Obviously, they get more snow than any of our other facilities. That gravel lot is impossible for us to go in and clear and make safe. We also have an issue where years ago, I don't know when, but they installed an ADA parking spot, which most of the year is basically a lake. It's non-functional. We don't have any ADA parking up there. So we've been working with the county, trying to come up with a way that they will allow us to pave that because it's in their right-of-way. So we can't just pave it, even though it's existing parking. We have to go through the process of getting a permit in order to do so. The problem is there is an issue with their standards where they have a site distance standard, and they've determined based on the speed of that corner that we need 150-foot sight distance, and the building is sticking out and kind of blocking that direction. So Where we're at right now is I have asked the county to basically go to their engineers and see if they can put in a stop sign on Drake, which will completely change that, because the whole issue is that there's no stop sign there, so people come around the corner from Drake onto Lower, and they're worried that they're gonna run into somebody backing out of the parking. And if they approve a permit, then they also would assume the liability if something were to happen. So right now where we're at is we're hoping that they will find a way to be able to put a stop sign right there for us. And that hopefully that will allow us to pave that area, put in a proper ADA parking spot so that we can access the main building. So.
Lauren, I'm sorry, I did want you to explain the high school lock project.
The high school parking lot?
No, the locks, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, basically, we have a lot of really old locks, one issue, okay? They're Corbin Russwin. They were installed initially, the phase one locks in like 97. So, we're having a lot of failures. It's a real challenging system to work with. The other issue is a lot of the phase one areas you cannot secure from inside the classroom. So they have some little things that have been installed on some of the doors that allow them to keep the door locked and closed, but it's not ideal. So basically this whole project would be to start the process to put a new key system in the building, put in classroom security locks that can be locked from inside the classroom, and basically replace a lot of the failing hardware. So the plan is to try and, because everything takes forever to get, the thought of trying to do this and get them installed this summer is just not even a possibility. So the plan right now is to try and put together the system, work with administration here to where we can put together the key system and try and get materials bid out and ordered so that we can have them for next summer to do the installation. So.
Thank you, Lauren. Anybody have any other questions for Lauren? Or?
No, just a comment for both of you guys. Thanks for putting the facilities budget by school together, because we get questions about that from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just good for lots of good data for people to pick apart. So, thank you.
Oh, Steve.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think just for clarification, the numbers that are in red, those are essentially operational costs per square foot and per student, right? I mean, is that how you would describe those?
That's just a that's just a calculation based on the just ongoing annual cost divided by number of students or divided by square feet.
If I use the term operational cost to describe it to somebody, you'd agree that that's what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, I just making sure I understood that that's what those numbers were, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mix the projects in there just because they vary so greatly.
Right.
School to school, year to year. Lauren, also, lastly, I keep coming up. Central Hal, the original plan was to try to do the gym and a wing. Is that correct? But it was going to cost too much.
Yes, based on current construction costs, et cetera, we backed that out. We were looking at trying to do the classroom building also, but after really looking at the gym project and the fact that we'd be looking at trying to replace the entire concrete floor because it's settled at the edges.
On the gym?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So, yeah, basically when they built that building, it's settled a lot, and if you go into it, you'll notice that the concrete floor, the tilt-up panels have actually settled down on the exterior of the building, so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we're keeping our fingers crossed on the application.
Yeah, most definitely.
Does that mean those old bathrooms get remodeled too?
Everything, so.
Wow.
I don't know, it's basically whatever gets impacted is what gets upgraded, so to speak. And if it's not impacted, then, it wouldn't be upgraded. We have replaced most all the fixtures and partitions at that building, so. But yeah, always more work to do.
Well, thank you very much, Lauren. Really appreciate your
Thank you.
expertise. and all your hard work.
Thank you.
The last thing I had to share in my new information is the state quarterly economic forecast was released yesterday, and this here, all of these items I flashed on the screen are on board book already, but this was just posted today. This is the official state executive summary. We didn't get any sort of report from COSA until about 5:30 today, so I haven't really had a chance to digest it. Of course, you've probably seen the news and the headlines, but just that the revenue numbers blew them away again. It's way up again since the March forecast, and so they're already talking about another kicker, a record kicker. We already just came off a record kicker that would be part of when you're doing your taxes in the spring of 2024. I guess with the corporate kicker anyway, it does, by statute come to schools. So we'll see how that works out. But in just getting a brief read of Morgan Allen's COSA report, these numbers are huge, and yes, they do talk about the looming downturn or recession potentially here, and that would obviously have an impact on this type of report down the road to some extent. That apparently, and like I said, I haven't had a chance to really digest it yet, but it wasn't really reported anywhere at the state level. But for the general fund, they were saying because of the kicker, and even though the revenues are up, that their projected general fund revenue for 23-25 would be less than what they projected. So even though the news is good at the surface, looking down the road, obviously it's not necessarily great. But again, we know how much things change, right, from quarter to quarter. It's amazing. This is probably as far, and again, it just kind of goes to show us how everything is so unpredictable that the revenue could be that much above projection in just 3 months. It's amazing. But there's so much. I think I told Jonathan the other day, just the school budget feels like it went from a 1,000-piece puzzle to a 2,000-piece puzzle in the last 2 years. But anyway, so sorry. I wish I could share a little bit more on that, but this was all just coming to us today. So,
Steve, question. It's on the previous one, and before I ask it, I just wanted to determine if what I've heard is accurate in terms of a pre-K coming to the Mark Twain School.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Matt, for that reminder. We got to talk about that at the coffee hour, didn't we? A little bit. So yes, we do have our. Go ahead, Leslie.
So this school year, we have had a preschool running as part of our school district, and it's been housed in a local church.
Mm-hmm.
And we had 18 preschool students and a teacher and 2 classified staff members working there. And we are able to move that preschool classroom into Mark Twain Elementary School because they have open classrooms right now, since their enrollment is down. So we're very fortunate to move it into the school so those parents and students feel a part of our school, and it will make things a little more streamlined for us to have it in a school building rather than a church. Right now, one of their classified assistants is running over to another school to pick up their school lunches every day to bring them back to preschool. So this moving into Mark Twain will just really help with those kinds of things: transportation, services, meal services, etc.
And that preschool program is funded through the state preschool promise grant, which is in those 200 funds that we discussed during Leslie's presentation.
Okay.
The ultimate plan is to get that preschool program into the old, what is it called? CTP house? Here at the high school, over by the tennis courts. But there's some renovations that need to be done there, and we have limited resources. We're going to do some modest improvements so it could at least be inhabited by a program of some sort, but ultimately it'd be nice within the next 2 years to get the preschool in there. How does it correlate with the high school?
Our goal is to start a high school CTE class for early childhood education so that students, we can articulate it with like Chemeketa Community College, and students can earn college credit and graduate from high school and be certified to work in a daycare or in a preschool or something like that. So it's a job skills training opportunity for them in high school, working with our own preschool students. So that would be a dream goal that we have, to have preschool on the high school campus so that we can have that connection.
Yeah, I think that's a great goal and everything for the long term. I guess just the comment about the additional space at the Mark Twain School. How many pre-K students is it in?
20 students
So-
total.
Okay, so 20 on top of additional transfers to Mark Twain, there's capacity.
Mark Twain still has capacity. They house 350
Mhm.
students total, and right now they're right under 300,
They're
Okay.
260.
260.
Okay.
So still
Thank you.
space.
So, Mr. Chair, that's all the new information I have to share.
Okay. Any other questions, comments regarding this information? All right, we'll open up to public comment. If you would like to speak during public comment, please email Debbie Vailoff at Vailoff_Debbie@silverfalls.k12.or.us. If you are in attendance, you can just approach the table up here. Nothing online? In-house? Nope. All right. So questions, discussions for us? How did the coffee meetings go? I was unable to attend.
Well, it was good. Well, we only had 4, but they were good discussions. So we had 2 of the 3 meetings. We had the 2 in-person meetings, and Blinn joined us for the first one, and then Stephanie and Matt and Astrid came for the Wednesday night meeting, and yeah, there were a lot of good questions and conversations, I thought. So I guess we'll let Blinn and the attendees could maybe speak to that. I hope it was okay.
Yeah, it was good. I appreciate the chance to ask questions and visit with Steve and Dan. So yeah, it helped me.
Great.
Yeah, it was very helpful, particularly the way that some of the terms are identified in the budget. It's difficult to decipher, what it actually is without more context. So that was very helpful. And seeing the PAB, I believe, with all the definitions.
Yes,
Yeah.
the PBAM. Yes,
Yeah,
that was a great point. Some of the function programs are obvious. 1111 is elementary education, and 2120 is counseling. But what does 1280 alternative education encompass? So when I communicated with you all and pointed you to, I think it was pages 50 through 70 or something like that in the Oregon Chart of Accounts. There's some definition there, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but just some of those that are a little harder to figure out what they are. I thought that was, without getting, having to read too much, provided a little more insight, hopefully. So we were talking about things like that and lots of other things too. So, yeah. Stephanie, did you feel?
Yeah, I thought that was
yeah.
the most helpful too, just to be able to understand what was
Yeah.
where and why or how it got there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Excellent. All right, well, I think it's time for some kind of action. If anybody doesn't have questions or comments or adjustments or ideas.
I just have one more question. I think is it Save Rural Schools? It's the federal money that was supposed to replace some of the timber revenue. Marion County, I would imagine, I think most counties received something, and there were only a handful that didn't. I was wondering, because we've got federal forest fees here, 4801, but I don't think that's the same category. I was wondering if is that it?
You're talking about the situation where the states didn't see in the law that it wasn't really, it shouldn't really be wrapped into the state school
Right.
fund formula. Is
They
that
were
right? Is that
using
right?
it, yeah, they were sort of supplanting the
Yeah.
state school fund contribution, and now they've corrected that, and so we'll see how that pans out, but I was just curious where that was in our resources, because.
Yeah, so it is 4801, yes,
Okay.
Janet, on page 1 of the resources report. Federal forest fees, so yes, so $5,000, that's typically been a budgeted amount. That is one of the 6 or 7, when you know, you look at that state school fund sheet, which I think is in your supplemental section. We could follow it back to that. I think we had it in there. Yeah, so in the supplemental section, it was probably in the very back now, but the state school fund grant sheet there. Does everyone see that? So yes, that 4801, you see the federal forest fees there in the top left box.
Right.
That's where that correlates. So
Okay.
in our revenue, whether it's in the general fund or any other fund, revenue that starts with source code 1 is a local revenue, like the property taxes. Anything that starts with a 2 is intermediate revenue, like money that gets passed through by the ESD or county school funds, which also goes into the local revenue for state school fund purposes. Anything that begins with a 3 is a state resource, which of course is our biggest resource with the state school fund, which is the income tax part. And then anything that starts with a 4 is federal revenue. So yes, we do get quite a bit of federal revenue with those grants, the title grants, for example. But in terms of the state school fund, you could see that federal forest fees plays a very small role.
It's very small, yeah. So regardless of how they sort of fix that
Yeah.
issue, isn't going to have much of an effect.
But-
Why are there zeros in those?
Well, we're not part of any of those items, ESD equalization, those other local revenue categories we're not part of, but.
No, I'm sorry, for 4801 in the
Oh,
actual.
because we didn't actually receive any.
Oh.
That's one that we have no idea. State and federal timber, we have no idea
Just-
what's coming our way.
Okay.
One year we could get 50,000 in state timber, the next we could get 200 and some thousand, but it really just rolls into the state school fund pot because, you know, for simplicity purposes, let's say we had, you know, 10 kids at $10,000 each, and we had $100,000 in what I call total formula revenue. The key box to look at is the one called total formula revenue. So when you look at that 22-23 estimate, you can see $41.4 million. So that's based on our extended ADMW, which we talked about earlier, our enrollment plus the additional weights. They pay us on the current or the prior year, whichever is higher, and then they multiply it times the $9,955 and the rate per ADMW. That gets you to that $41,462,000. So that's how much, you know, through the formula they say we should get. Now, we're projecting that we're going to receive $10 million, if you go back to the top left box, in local revenue. So that means that the state only needs to pay us directly the difference. So $31 million through the state school fund. And we receive a state school fund payment every month, a double payment in July, and then payments August through May, and no payment in June. June's kind of a bummer. We don't get a state school fund payment, and we have balance of contract payrolls. But July is great because our expenses are the lowest, and we get a double payment. So, but that's kind of how that works. And so, in terms of the federal forest fee part, you know, we do, you know, the property taxes, we usually get pretty close, where we estimate that here on our own. They tell us what common and county school is going to be, and federal and state forest fees are just a guess.
Yeah.
So obviously there's some districts in the state that get quite a bit of state timber revenue depending on where they're located. I know Jewel School District, for example, in the past received more local revenue than their total formula revenue called for. So they actually get to keep that excess. But in most districts' case, the local revenue is less than your total formula revenue, so the local revenue just goes into the whole mix, so to speak. We do receive the local revenue directly. We receive property tax payments from Marion and Clackamas counties every month directly from them. So
This is a great sheet. I think this is really helpful when it's laid out like this.
But so what happened on the federal forest fee adjustment was it is a small amount. There's some districts that get a little bit more than others, but so it wasn't so much what we get or not get, it's what was the total of all the other districts, because that had a slight impact, I think a slight negative impact actually on us in this case. But if we were to get any relevant amount of federal forest fees, it would not count against us anymore. This won't get deducted
Right.
from our total formula revenue.
Right.
So that's going away. I found that quite interesting. Maybe you can explain better, because it was something that was missed in the federal law, in the code,
Right,
if I understand.
right. Yeah, because so we were, districts were receiving that, but then the state, like to your point, was sort of adding that to the bucket and then saying, okay, well, now you get less overall, you know.
Right, yeah.
And they weren't designed that way. They were supposed to be additional
Right.
to help those areas recover and to add to those budgets. And so they found that and fixed it.
Like 4 years ago, I think, correct? And they didn't catch it. It's been like 3
Yeah,
or
it
4
was
years.
2018.
So they still plan on going back to those state school
They're gonna have
fund
to
years
adjust
and
it.
making those adjustments, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, great, thanks.
Hopefully we'll be on the winning end of that, but
Yeah.
it's hard to know.
Any other questions, comments? Motions?
Do we have the official motion? Because I know there's some verbiage.
I have it here, I can make it. I move that the Budget Committee of the Silver Falls School District approve the 2022-23 fiscal year budget at $74,233,886 and set next year's tax levy rate at a permanent tax rate of $4.548 per thousand of assessed value, and approve a tax levy of $4,457,176 for the purpose of retiring bonded debt of the district.
Could I get you to just clarify that number one more time?
So a permit rate of $4.5458 per $1,000.
Thank you.
Assessed value. Yeah, thank you.
Second?
All right, motion second. Debbie?
Aaron,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Matt Gaitan, Janet,
Yes.
Matt Plummer,
Yes.
Wally,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Astrid.
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor.
All right. Well, I would first like to say thank you to staff for putting all of this together, and I think the absence of any moving around and, I guess critical call-outs of things attests to the quality of the effort put in, and that's comforting as a budget member as well as a parent and taxpayer. So thank you all.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Any last comments?
I just wanted to publicly thank Robin Welch. I wanted to thank all of you. But I want to thank Robin Welch. She was not able to make, she had a sick child this evening, and her term is finishing up. And I think she served 2 terms, so I'm not sure if she'll be reapplying or not, but I just wanted to publicly thank her for her service. And I know Stephanie's position was for this year, but need to refill the position for next year, right? So, and then everyone else gets to is still on their terms, I believe. So, yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Well, meeting adjourned.
Thanks.